Good evening, everyone. We are now in Second Kings, chapter 16. Please bear in mind that every now and then we're given the reign or the start of a reign of a king, and you will always invariably see it contrasted or locked into the other king, because we are now in a situation of two kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And so whenever we talk about the northern king ascension, will always be corresponding to the southern king's number of year of rule, and vice versa. And so now we say this: in the 17th year of Pekach, the son of Remaliah, then we have Achatz. Achatz is the king of the south. And so we have Achatz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, became king. And now we have the description. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 16 years in Jerusalem. And he did not do what was right in the sight of the Lord, his God, as his father David had done. Now, allow me to just draw out first the background. We have Jotham, and he ruled for 16 years. And by the time he finished, we have Achatz. And here we have this as the 17th year, 17th year of Pekach. And Pekach would have died by the time of his 20th year. So we have here in the 20th year of Jotham, here we have Hoshea. And this is what we had yesterday when we left off. At this point in time, I just draw your attention to the fact that in the 17th year of Pekach, Achatz became king. Yesterday, we say that Hoshea became king in the 20th year of Jotham. Now, 20th year of Jotham means 4 years after he died. And Jotham lived for 16 years of his reign. So what we have here is a reference to Pekach, and then Achat took over. Now, what is important for us to realize is that Jotham and his father, Uzziah or Azariah, they are considered the silver kingdom of Judah. And now with Achat coming to the throne, Achat is now introduced as one that did not do what is right in the eyes of God, and did not do what his father David had done. Now, what do we know of David? He would be a man after God's own heart, meaning a man who does everything that God tells him to do. Now, Achat is a troubled king, I would say, and you would see everything in Second Chronicles. Second Chronicles chapter 28 would be listing out his life. And when you read Second Chronicles chapter 28, you would find that there is a lot of things that we don't read here in Second Kings chapter 16, but sufficient for us to understand the other side of his life where we have a little bit more detail. But the general idea is actually presented in Second Kings chapter 16 right here. So now we carry on to understand he did not do what is right means what is straight, what is yasha, right means Yasha, and what is right means what is straight by God. What God tells him to do and walk, he did not do that. Verse 3 then gives us a little bit more of the glimpse of what it means by what was not right by God. So verse 3 says, but he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, which is very unusual. You find that many of the kings of the south, though they did not do what David had done, but they were not as bad as Achaz. So chapter 16 really paints us a very bad picture of Achaz. And why was he described as not doing what was right in the eyes of God? He walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. Now, every time we talk about the king of Israel, we read of them being evil, doing evil in the eyes of God. But in the southern kingdom of Judah, they are described as doing what is not right, what is not Yasha by the eyes of God. And so we read in verse 3 these words. And then he walked in the way, the conduct of the northern kings, and he even made his sons pass through the fire. And this is a ritual which God is very disgusted. It says here, in accordance with the abominations of the nations whom the Lord had driven out before the sons of Israel. This word abominations is important for us to recognize that these are the idolatry, things which is a disgust to God. And what they did was, in some of the idolatry, there is a ritual to pass the sons through fire, uh, walking through fire and offering them in fire. This idea through is also in. And so you have the person being offered. And this is an abomination. Now, why is this an abomination? Because we always remember when God made man, he made man in the image of God. And human life, therefore, is sacred. All forms of human life, whether rich or poor. And so the rich is supposed to take care of the poor. But when you take a human life, especially innocent human life, and make it into an offering, this is an abomination because human life is sacred to God. And God looks at innocent life as very precious. And when they pass their sons through the fire or into the fire as an offering to the idols of the nations in the northern kingdom, where there used to be Canaanites and the Amorites, God sees this as an abomination. It is disgusting, and God sees this as an utter evil. Human life are not supposed to be simply taken. And so if a man takes the life of another man, he is subjected to the criminal justice system to be judged. So you're not supposed to shed the blood of another human, whether intentional or unintentional. And in this case, when they pass their sons through the fire, it's like an offering to idols. And that is constituting killing an innocent life, a total abomination to God. Verse 4 And then he slaughtered animals and made offerings. So sacrifice means the slaughter of animals. And then burned incense on the high places, which is the Bama, on the hills and under every green tree. So we have here the high places are private altars, which they did not destroy. On the hills where the altars are, and under every green tree, which is called the uh, Asherah. And this is a pagan practice. What is important for us to realize is Akkad participated in idolatry, similar to Achav and Jezebel. We must always realize that the northern nation, the northern kingdom, had included idolatry in their repertoire of sins. Whereas the southern kingdom did not destroy all the high places, meaning the private altars, where God says, now that you have a place that He has appointed, Jerusalem, with a temple built, that you're not supposed to have private sacrifices. But Akkad continued and expanded that practice into idolatry. Now, what we have now is verses 5 and 6. I want us to pay attention to verses 5 and 6 because it ties into Isaiah chapter 7. 2 Kings chapter 16 and in verse 5. At this time, Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekach, the son of Remaliah, the king of Israel, went up to Jerusalem for war, and they besieged Akkad, but they were not capable of fighting him. Now, this idea of fighting him is to engage in a war, and they couldn't win over him. So this is very interesting. You find we have Rezin, Syria, and then we have Pekach, Israel, and they both joined forces and came against Akkad. And this is Judah. It is important for us to realize by combining forces, they were still not able to take over Judah. Now, bear in mind the promise of 2 Samuel chapter 7. 2 Samuel chapter 7 is God's promise to David that his throne will be there for a long, long time. As long as they obey God, God will chastise them, but God will come and visit them in the third and fourth generation if they practice idolatry. And this is the beginning of an end. Idolatry is something which God forbade. Exodus chapter 20, you shall not make any image after the likeness of the animals, the beasts on the land, the birds that fly, and the fish in the sea, or after any image, even of a man. And Akkad started to do that. Now, in this case, we find another item in verse 6. At that time, Rezin, the king of Aram, restored Elat. Elat is actually a place where it used to be belonging to Edom. Elat today is at the southern tip of the land of Israel. It was taken back by Azariah. And we see this in 2 Kings chapter 14 and in verse 22. And now Rezin came to conquer Eilat. And when he conquered Eilat, the Judeans, the ones in the south, we learn of this word, the Judean or the Jewish people, Yehudi, or if you like, the Jews, away from Eilat. And then this word Arameans came to Eilat and lived there to this day. This word should be better known as the Edomites. So what happened is Rezin came to conquer Eilat, and the Edomites came back to occupy their original land. That would be what verse 6 is saying. Now, at this time, I would like to then take your attention to Isaiah chapter 7 to bear in mind this very unusual situation. Pekah and Rezin came against Achaz. And Achaz, while he is not losing the battle, he is not winning either. And he is very afraid that he will actually lose the battle. And with this, let us move on to Isaiah chapter 7. We will read a few of these verses just to give you a highlight of what transpired when Achaz is so afraid of Pekah and Rezin, who joined forces to attack Achaz, Judah. The passage comes from Isaiah chapter 7, verse 1. Now it came about in the days of Achaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, the king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Aram, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went to Jerusalem to wage war against it, but could not conquer it. We saw that in verse 5 of 2 Kings chapter 16. When it was reported to the house of David, saying, the Arameans have taken a stand by Ephraim, his heart and the hearts of the people shook as the trees of the forest shake from the wind. They were very terrified of hearing the joint venture between Rezin of Syria and Pekah of Israel. Verse 3, then the Lord said to Isaiah, go out now to meet Achaz, you and your son. And this is She'er Yashuf. We read in Isaiah chapter 7, and involving the son of Isaiah, She'er Yashuf, at the end of the channel of the upper pool on the road to the open field of the washer's field, basically. We now need to be aware that while Achaz is a very, very bad king, went into idolatry, God still have a promise to David to protect the throne of David in Judah. And while we have the incredible force of Rezin and Pekah against Achaz, God will not allow the throne of Judah to be overthrown, even at this time, even when Achaz is a really bad king. And so say to him, take care and be calm. God is giving Achaz a prophecy that he will be protected. Now, if you think hard enough, you find that why would God protect Achaz? He is really bad. It is not because of Achaz, but because of David. Even though he didn't do what David did, God had promised David. And so he says, have no fear. Trust God. Do not be faint-hearted because of these two stumps of smoldering logs. Stumps of smoldering logs, meaning they are stumps of fire that could come after you on account of the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram and the son of Remaliah. These two who wants to come after you. Because Aram with Ephraim and the son of Remaliah has planned evil against you, saying, let us go up against Judah and terrorize it. Now, this word terrorize is, how should we say, cause them to lose sleep and take it for ourselves by assault and set up the son of Tabil. This is Taf'al would be the proper way of saying the word of Taf'al as king in the midst of it, meaning to overthrow Akkad and put up another king. We need to understand that in the north, there were a series of assassinations and conspiracies to take over the throne. God has allowed that and let that loose because the northern kingdom is really terrible and horrible, where they have no respect for the throne as well as no respect for God and did evil in the eyes of God. But the southern kingdom, by and large, as you can now tell, that Akkad came out of a silver kingdom period of Uzziah and Jotham. They were very, very good kings until Akkad came along. So a very good king in Jotham can give rise to a very bad king in Akkad. But God is not about to give up on the southern kingdom. And so we now read of what God is planning to do. In verse 7 of Isaiah chapter 7, this is what the Lord God says. And so we have God speaking, Adonai speaking. He says, it shall not stand, nor shall it come to pass. What about this? It means that Redzin and Pekah will not win. They will not be able to capture Jerusalem. That is what it means. It shall not stand. It shall not come to pass. He says, for the head of Aram is Damascus. The head of Damascus is Redzin. Now, within another 65 years, Ephraim will be broken into pieces. It will no longer be a people. Now, this is a comment that after Pekah, we have Hosea. After Hosea, it will be the end. Verse 9, the head of Ephraim is Samaria. The head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah, Pekah. If you will not believe, you shall certainly not last. Now, verse 9 says not last means it will not hold, it will not be firm. The head of Ephraim will lose. Verse 10, and then the Lord said again to Akkad, more things to say to Akkad, the bad and evil king who did what was not right, not yashar in the eyes of God, and went into idolatry and brought the entire kingdom with him. And so God asked Akkad, ask for a sign for yourself, that you know that God has made this promise and that Redzin and Pekah will not win over you. Make it deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. What this means is that this sign, ask for it, whatever it may be, down in the ground or up in the sky, as long as you ask, God will give you. Verse 12, but Akkad said, I will not ask, nor will I put the Lord to the test. Strangely, Akkad suddenly became very innocent. And he said, I will not ask. God now says this, and then he said, listen now, house of David. Is it too trivial a thing for you to do? To try the patience of men, that you will also try the patience of my God as well? Verse 14, Therefore, God himself will give you a sign. And the sign is that, behold, the young woman will conceive and will give birth to a son, and she will call him Emmanuel. Uh, uh, that God El will be with him. Now, what is important is the sign is not the birth. Remember, the sign is visible. The sign is not invisible. And so the sign is in verse 15. The sign is he will eat curds and honey at that time, that he knows enough to refuse good from evil. For before the boy knows to refuse evil and choose good, the land whose two kings you dread will be abandoned. And this is the sign. It is visible because in a few years from now, before this boy who is born will know how to refuse evil and choose good, both Rezin and Pekah will give up on Judah. That is the sign. And so it is important now for us to realize that God is giving Achaz a sign to trust God that these two Pekah of Israel and Rezin of Syria will not be able to conquer Judah. That is a promise given by God. There is a sign given by God. And God sent Isaiah, his prophet, to tell Achaz. And now we come back to 2 Kings chapter 16, verse 7. Verse 7 begins this way. The word so is really and then. This will be after Isaiah chapter 7. After God sent Isaiah, the prophet, to see this evil king of Achaz, to protect the throne of David, to show Achaz a sign that God will not allow Pekah and Rezin to conquer Judah, Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser. We had Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, actually coming to the northern kingdom, where Pekah had actually ruled as king, and took the upper region, what we call the northern region, from Galilee all the way up north. And you find that the king of Assyria had started to deal with the northern kingdom. That is the beginning of the fall of the northern kingdom. And so Ahaz thought that instead of trusting God, he could make an alliance with Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, since he was already on the verge of wanting to take the northern kingdom. And he, instead of bowing down to God, Jehovah God, and knowing that Isaiah has told him that God is not going to allow them to take over Judah, he went to the king of Assyria and says, I am your servant and your son. He actually submitted instead of the God of David. He submitted to the king of Assyria. He says, come up and save me from the hand of the king of Aram and from the king of Israel who are rising up against me. And in so doing, in verse 8, Ahaz took the silver and gold that was in the house of God, take everything out from the temple, and the treasuries of the king house, everything that he has for the nation, and sent a tribute to the king of Assyria. And so the king of Assyria listened to his pleading, and the king of Assyria went up against Damascus, captured it, led the people into exile to Kir and killed Rezin. And so he died. After this alliance with the king of Assyria, Ahaz thought that after Rezin had died, all the cities that were conquered by Rezin and his father would be given back to Ahaz. But the king of Assyria did no such thing. In verse 10, and then King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria. The king went to Assyria, and Ahaz saw the altar which was at Damascus. And then King Ahaz sent to Uriah, the high priest, the design of the altar and its model. Now, understand this. The design, this would be the design. This would be the model. And by model, this would be the figure, the sample of the figure, according to all its workmanship, meaning the materials, how it was done. As you can tell, while Ahaz went into idolatry, he is now beginning to do something even worse. In verse 11, and then Uriah the high priest, he built the altar according to the pattern and the model and the workmanship. Because if you don't, you'll be dead. According to everything that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus, in that way, Uriah the priest made it before the king of Ahaz came back from Damascus, meaning he did nothing with the altar. And then when the king came back from Damascus, the king saw the altar. Wow, he said. And then the king approached the altar and went up to it. And then he burned his burnt offering. Now, verse 13, burnt offering is olah, which you find in Leviticus chapters 1 through 7. There is the olah, burnt offering. Naaman would do burnt offering. So burnt offering is a way of thanksgiving. You burn a sacrifice. And his meal offering using flour. And his libation, he poured out his drink offering. And then he sprinkled blood of his peace offering, which is a shlamim, on the altar. So what you find is that these are all the offerings, the Levitical offerings. And he did it himself. Guess what? You're not supposed to do that in the temple of God. It is the priest who would do that. And so when the king came in, he went in to do it on his own altar. And verse 14 tells us the bronze altar or the copper altar, which was originally built by King Solomon, which was before the Lord, meaning in the front of the temple, he brought from the house of the Lord, from between his altar and the house of the altar, and he put it on the north side of his altar, meaning he moved the location of the altar of God. That was how God had instructed to be built. This is a big altar. But then Ahaz felt that his altar is better than Solomon's altar. Now, why did he do that? It was suggested that Ahaz thought that since Solomon as a king had decided, he as a king of Judah could also decide what to do with whatever is in the courtyard and whatever is there. Because he never saw God in the Torah instructing Moses with all the designs and the book of Leviticus, who can do what. He forgot. And that is what is not right. God's house God's rules. And Ahaz went into God's house and messed up God's rules. Verse 15. And then King Ahaz commanded Uriah the priest, which means that there is no option, saying, upon the great altar would be King Ahaz's altar that was the copy of the one in Damascus. You burn the morning burnt offering, the evening meal offering, the king's burnt offering and his meal offering, with the burnt offering of all the people of the land, their mincha, their drink offering, and sprinkle on it all the blood of the burnt offering and all the blood of the sacrifice. But the copper altar shall be for me, and I will use it to make inquiries, that I will attend to it. Basically, he is saying that I will come and I will visit. And so what we see is Ahaz changed God's rules in Leviticus chapters 1 to 7. And so we read, and then Uriah the priest acted in accordance with everything that the king had commanded. Verse 17. And then King Ahaz cut off the borders of the stands. Now you need to understand these are the stands of the wash basin, or what they call the huge basin that sat next to the altar. And then he removed the wash basin from them. And he also took down the sea of the bronze oxen. So the places where they wash, the places where you have called the huge bronze bowl called the sea, which were under it. He removed the base and set it on the ground. Verse 18, and the covered way for the Shabbat, which they had built in the house, and the outer entry of the king, he removed from the house of the Lord because of the king of Assyria. What basically this meant was that there is an official way to enter into the temple courtyard. But he actually removed that because he felt that in case the king of Assyria would want to kill him, that would be a good place to ambush. And so he built a private entry directly from the king's house to the temple. And that is a violation of the design of the temple. We come to the end of chapter 16. Now, as for the rest of the acts of Ahaz which he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah, which is presumably in the first and second Chronicles, and we see this in Second Chronicles chapter 28. It is the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel that we don't have anymore. We read now, and then Ahaz lay down with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, recognized as a king, and his son Hezekiah reigned in his place. What we can now see is, interestingly, Uzziah and Jotham were both very great kings. Jotham had a son that we just read, Ahaz, which is a terrible king. And the son of Ahaz is Hezekiah, which we will eventually see as a wonderful king. And so the kings themselves are personally responsible for their own conduct. It cannot be said that it is dependent solely on the father. But in the case of Achav and Jezebel, they had such an influence on their children that their children continuously had idolatry in their repertoire. And so, with this, we come to the end of our session today.